let's take that out and see what it is. Looky there, 15-pound beef brisket. All right, well, we're gonna dive into some of this for dinner, and then we're gonna get the leftovers into the freeze dryer. Okay, so we've put it in the fridge overnight and dried it a little bit on the top, but I like these crunchy bits anyway, so that's not a problem. And we're going to freeze dry it. And so now all we're going to do is take off the layer of fat. So we let the fat drain out of it, the fat in the pan, you know, drain off of it. And if you wanted to render this down, I mean, you could, but you really should use kidney fat. And we're just trying to get as much of that fat out. A little bit's not going to hurt because we're going to chop this before we freeze dry it. We're not going to freeze dry it whole. All right. So once you do that, this stuff's just going to fall apart. It's super tender, and when it's freeze dried, I'm sure it's going to be in little pieces like that. And so we're going to go ahead and chop it and crumble it up, and yummy. And then we're going to do some of it just straight brisket, and then we're going to add barbecue sauce to some of the other. All right. Looking good so far. Beautiful chopped brisket. Like that fat on the backside needs to come off. Should have probably cut that off first. So any thick layer of fat like that needs to come off so that it's super thin. The interstitial fat is going to be okay, but like that, it needs to come off. And that's mostly fat. So again, any of this stuff that's mostly fat is going to need to come off. If it's meat, that's fine, but fat's got to go. Thick deposits of fat, because they're just not going to freeze dry. Alright, well, let's clean this up and get some of the meat on the trays for freezing. Okay, so I went through this bowl by hand and basically crumbled all the pieces. I used feel to take out any pieces that felt real fatty, or if the connective tissue was just excessive, I just pulled all that stuff out by hand, which those are probably the best cuts to make pastrami out of, or to eat fresh. But in our case, again, we're freeze drying this stuff, and this is already a naturally high fat cut of beef, and so we want to try and remove as much of those big things as possible. So now we're just gonna try and spread it out evenly on the tray, and if we find any big solid chunks, you know, we'll just want to kind of pull those apart. We don't want it to get too thick. That may already be too thick, but that's about what we're going to go with. It's about tray height. And we'll go from there. So that's just going to be the plain brisket one. And then we're going to mix up some barbecue sauce and try this one barbecued and just see if that rehydrates well or not. So we'll get this one in the freezer and then start with the barbecued brisket. All right, so we're just going to start with a bottle of Stubbs Original. If I could get Cattleman's Gold or something more like a southern mustard base, I would just use that. Like Foy's is great, you can get it. But we're just going to touch this up a little bit and see how it goes. And we're just going to add maybe 4 tablespoons of yellow mustard. Maybe a tablespoon of sriracha. And We don't have French's, but we got Lee and Perrins, so we're gonna add a couple of tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And we're gonna give that a stir, and then we're gonna start adding the meat to get the right wetness that we'd like, and then we'll get it on the trays and get it in the freezer. All right, looks good. And of course, if you don't want yours with barbecue sauce, then just do it plain. Alright, and that's a pretty wet mix. We could add a little bit more, but I like mine on the wet side. So we're probably just going to go with that and get that in a tray and get it in the freezer. Again, what we're looking for here is just kind of uniform thickness, and we'll see how that freeze dries. That's kind of dense with the sauce on it, but hopefully it'll just be delicious. All right, so we're gonna get that in the freezer. I always like to fill out a tray, so we're gonna be using the 3-pepper and onion blend, and we're just gonna let that spread out here and get it in the freezer. All right, into the freezer it goes. Now for the wild card tray, we're going to try pickles. I had a special request from a subscriber to try pickles, and seems like we had tried spears in the past and they didn't work very good. So we're going to try some little ovals. These are just classic hamburger dill pickles. Okay, so that is a whole 16-ounce jar of pickles. And we probably got room for a couple of spears. So we're going to go with what we've got on hand, the Mount Olive kosher dill spears. So we're going to take like this one and we're just going to cut it in half. So hopefully you can see that. So I just cut a bigger pickle in half. And then we're going to cut this into bite-sized pieces. It seems like bite-sized things freeze dry pretty well. Okay. So there is our wild card tray for this batch. It's pickles. Got dill hamburger pickles and then a few spears there. So let's get these into the freezer and we'll start the batch after they're hard frozen. We just finished changing the oil and wiping down everything, and now we've just started the pre-freeze cycle because the products that we have are in the deep freeze right now and they're frozen overnight. It took about 35 minutes and to get below, about 30 minutes to get down to 32. And I was doing some other things, and so we're now at 41 minutes and it's dropped to 26 degrees F. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the drain valve and load the food in here. So on the bottom, we've got the pickles that are hard frozen. And then we've got some plain brisket and some seasoning, vegetables, onions, and peppers. And then we've got another full tray of the pre-frozen brisket. And then on the top shelf, we have the pre-frozen tray that includes the barbecue sauce already pre-mixed with the brisket. So we're gonna get the insulating pad put on. And get the door closed. Okay. And it's kicked off the freezer at about 23 degrees F. And we're just gonna continue. And then it's gonna freeze and then go through a vacuum cycle and probably take about 24 hours. So we will be back to you then. The buzzer started going off at about 17 hours and 50 minutes. And so the machine thinks it's done. It says to open the drain valve, letting the pressure back into the vessel. And we're gonna check it before we turn it off. So I'm gonna do that now. And now that the pressure's off, we can open the door. And the one I'm most concerned about is this one, I think, which had all the barbecue sauce on it. And so sometimes it's the bottom is where it might still need more time because it may not have gotten all the way through, but that looks and feels completely dry. So that's just amazing that this new Premier vacuum pump has cut down the vacuum time so dramatically. So that's the brisket with the barbecue sauce. So we'll get that bagged up. Let's take a look at these others. So this is the brisket, just plain brisket. It all looks great. Tastes like brisket. And this is the brisket with the vegetables. And the vegetables are definitely done. The brisket is definitely done. Delicious. And now the wild card tray. These are the pickles. Let's see how one of those. Yeah, they're crispy. I mean, yeah, they taste like pickle. They're actually a lot saltier. They seem a lot saltier than they were before they were freeze dried. So maybe try a different pickle. This is one of the spears pieces that we cut, bite-sized pieces of the spears. And it certainly feels freeze dried. Let's take a taste test. These are maybe more pickle-like. They're not as overly salty like the dill pickle ones are. And they're still salty, and it seems like freeze drying does intensify the base flavors of whatever it is that you're freeze drying. So it's still salty, but actually the spears may be better because those are really salty. The chips, and that's what these are kind of like, is potato chips. But they're super, at least the one. Super salty. Now they may rehydrate okay, I don't know, but you get some electrolytes on the trail that way for sure. All right, let's get all this stuff bagged up and get on with it. Now, notice that the brisket without the barbecue sauce kind of acts as a binder, and without the binder, the barbecue sauce added, it's loose, and as you would expect, this would be great for putting up for long-term storage in tin cans. We're gonna put it in Mylar bags, and we'll get probably this whole tray and the other half tray into one bag easily because the pieces are small and not big blocks. So yeah, we got the whole tray and a half of brisket, and this stuff is just excellent. It has the right texture. I mean, it's just like chopped brisket. It's wonderful. So we're gonna get some absorbers in here and move on to the next trays. All right, there's the barbecuing. Got it sealed up. brisket sealed up and the barbecue brisket. And you know, it always seems like I have room in most runs to do some more onions and pepper blend, and so we'll just wait till I get this bag filled up over the next couple of runs before we seal it. And then the pickles, that's the whole jar of pickles right there, and they're yummy. We're just gonna have to see how they rehydrate too. Not that I think that's the best way to eat them. Probably the best way to eat them is dehydrated, but I put them in here and it's been 5 minutes and they're already mostly pickle-like. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode on beef brisket. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and make sure to click the bell and select the option so that you get notifications every time that we update new content here on the FrostySith channel. And thanks for joining and watching today. And remember, whenever you can, get up, get out, live a little. See ya. Out, and we started the defrost cycle on the freeze dryer. And so now we're just gonna get these bagged up. That'll easily fit in a Harvest Right bag, and I'll probably put the pickles in some smaller bags, and then we'll just get this